Thank you so much for tuning in. I love camera gear and I love finding ways to improve the performance of lenses and just camera bodies in general. I'm going to show you guys 5 ways and possibly a bonus tip as well, how to improve the performance and the overall aesthetics and image quality of your Blackmagic Pocket Cinema Camera 4K. I'm just gonna let you guys know ahead of time, I'm not gonna have this camera angle because we're using the Blackmagic as our main camera, but we're gonna have our G85 overhead camera, and right here on the table, you're gonna get to see everything. I'm gonna lay everything out for you guys, and I'm gonna give you guys an honest opinion, and I'm gonna show you guys 5 ways plus a bonus tip. The camera shot we're filming on right now is using all 5 of these tips right now. So let's get started. Here we have it, my Blackmagic Pocket Cinema Camera 4K rig. And sorry we don't have the other angle. However, we do have the overhead camera. And I feel like this is probably the best way to show you guys anyways. So I'm gonna try to keep everything in frame. I've got a monitor just off here to the side. So let's get started, guys. Now, number 1 on the list is the camera cage itself. So first of all, what I'm gonna do is, because we're gonna talk about this kind of at the same time, because it kind of works alongside as well. But what we do have is a small rig cage for the Blackmagic Pocket Cinema Camera 4K. I also have a small rig cage for my Panasonic G85 as well. And I must say, this thing is fantastic. I'm located in Ontario, Canada, so a lot of things I get is just through Canada, because if I buy something internationally, you have to pay the taxes and so on. What I do like about it too is that underneath here, you do have access to a Allen key, which is phenomenal. Like I can't think of any other camera gear, whether it be a shoulder rig or anything, that comes with this. And why do you want to do this? Well, the main reason you want to have a cage like this is quite simply because this camera is very light. And one good way to combat that is to add more weight to the camera. Not only are you able to throw on a monitor, put external batteries on here, which we'll get into later, but this is a very good cage, and Small Rig does a good job because it fits nice on this camera. Like, I'm telling you, sometimes cages will move. This one doesn't move. Like, it's on there. It feels like it's somewhat symbiotic with the camera now. But guys, this thing is phenomenal. I recommend it. It comes with the Allen key, and it fits nicely right in here. Whoever engineered that, like, kudos to you, man. But it's got all these little threads on the side where you can put on different mounts. I've just got like a little, this is just like a little cold shoe to, I believe, 1/4-inch mount. So, but guys, this thing is phenomenal. You should get a cage. I picked this one up for under $100 on Amazon.ca. So if you're in the States, with the currency exchange, it's probably more like $50. So yeah, pick up a small rig cage. Now, to kind of coincide with it as well, I do have a base plate that I use. I like these Manfrotto quick release plates. If you don't have one, I recommend getting the same kind. So essentially I could take this camera, put it on my tripod as is, or I could put it on this cage pretty fast, tighten that down. And now I can put this entire rig on a tripod as well. Right now I've got this thing on 15mm rails, and what this allows me to do is to attach different components. So as you can see right here, I've got different plates, and on the front, if I go to the side here, I can actually put on something like a shoulder rig, which is hard to do one-handed, but we'll figure it out. So these are 15mm rods. I'll also put this in the description as well. So I'm only gonna put one on for now, just for the video. I've got a nice shoulder rig shot already. So that's looking pretty good. And right now it's getting beefier, it's getting heavier, and we're kind of combating all those issues that you would get just straight out of the box, because honestly, this camera is very light, and if you haven't seen my review of the camera, I'm gonna put in the description right now. And that's one of the main issues I've had with this camera and several other DSLR type cameras, is that they're just not heavy enough. And I know we're trying to go for lighter cameras. However, this doesn't fix, it doesn't always make for a cinematic look. If you want a cinematic shot, you really want to have a heavier camera, because it's going to support the sensor. The sensor inside this camera, it's small, it's light, it's beautiful, but if you look at it, it's very small. It's a very small sensor inside there. It's a micro four thirds, so it's very important to think about as well. So moving on to number 2, and that is going to be the power issue on this camera. Now, how do we fix that? I've done a lot of research on this, just to let you know. I try to find budget-friendly ways, but the one thing I found out was that you can hook up these Sony NPF-style batteries. Now, when you're talking about battery life, I'm not an expert, but I can give you a quick kind of guide as to how I think about batteries when I buy them. Now, you have what is voltage, and that's going to be the power that's running through the camera. The one thing you want to look at in terms of battery length and storage, you want to look under here, and you actually want to find the milliamps an hour. And you want to find the milliamps per hour. When I used to use RC cars, that was when lithium ion batteries first started coming out. They were able to charge even though the battery wasn't dead. When you used to have the nickel cadmium battery and the other alkaline type batteries, you'd want to basically kill the battery before recharging it again. Otherwise, it would burn out over time. Lithium ion has been a pretty good battery technology, and I'm pretty excited to see what's going to come in after that. But I don't know if you could see it here, but right here you've got what's called MAH, M-A-H. Now, this one's 6,600 milliamps per hour. And in the camera, now, this is a knockoff battery that would come with the Blackmagic. And I've been finding that these last honestly, they last like 20 minutes. And with this battery, I've been finding that they last anywhere from, 2.5 hours to 4 hours, depending on if you get good ones. These newer ones, they're 6,600 milliamps an hour. Technically, they should last about 2.5, 3 times longer. But I found that these last pretty long. And when you're using them with what I'm going to show you here, it's actually able to charge the battery inside as well. Now, how am I doing this? What is going on? How am I able to use this size battery in comparison to this one? So this guy versus this one. Well, what I've done is I went on eBay and I've been doing some research on this. You can use bigger batteries that have D-tap. This is what you would call V-mount batteries. However, they're very expensive. You're going to spend, to equip this, you're going to be spending at least $200-300, and that's per battery. These ones are what, $20 to $30 online. So I picked up tons of them. So I've got 3 right here, and I've got 3 more charging. I've got 6 of these. These last me an entire day's worth of shooting, which is incredible to be able to do on this camera because the battery sucks. I've attached a quick release plate here, and what this is I am able to plug this cable into the camera. So I basically plug it into the power here. So I've got this set up on my rig. You can even put this on the camera too. I just plug that on like this, tighten it. So now this is sturdy on the camera. I could put it up here as well or on the side, but I choose to put it up here. And what I do, if I move this here, is I grab the end of this cable and I plug it in to where it says 12 volts. So you turn it, make sure that you don't line this up incorrectly because you could damage the camera. And you hear that little click. So basically you pull the front and then it'll take it out. So where it says 12 volts right here, I take the end of this adapter and I plug it in, line it up so you don't break anything. You don't want to mess that up. So I flip this up. I take one of these charged NPF style batteries. This one, again, 6,600 milliamps an hour. Now this is a 970. They have smaller ones and bigger ones. I like this one. It's not too big and I can still see my screen on the back. Now I just put that down and make sure it goes nice in here. And this is called an ANSO. And as you can see here, there's a little green light. That's kind of to show me that it's working right here. And when I turn this on, I've got an extreme amount of power. But as for number 2, this is the best way and most affordable way to get reasonable amount of battery life to the Blackmagic Pocket Cinema camera. Now for number 3, I actually don't have this yet. It's still on order. I was hoping it would come in, but I want to get this video out for you guys. But as you can see right here, this camera takes SD cards. But this one is 155 megabytes per second, and this card works really well. I can shoot in pretty much any format. I just don't think I can do RAW lossless. I mean, you're trying to fit such a high quality and high resolution camera that's not compressed like we're used to seeing on DSLRs onto little cards like this. But one way you can combat that is to actually use the USB on the side. So that would be just up here. And what you can do is put in something like a Samsung SSD, and that's a solid state drive. It's much like this, but a lot bigger. You could pretty much attach 500 gigabytes or a terabyte. So when you're doing long length interviews, you can shoot at a higher codec. Like I said, I just don't have one. The only thing is you have to be aware, and you cannot unplug it when recording. If you unplug the SSD while recording, then you're going to lose the footage. You may even damage it or corrupt it. What are we going to talk about here? Let's take this lens off here because we're going to talk about it in just a second. But what we have here is a VILTROX M2 speed booster. So what is a speed booster? Well, a speed booster allows you to get more light into the sensor. So a lot of small micro four third type sensors. Now a lot of micro four thirds sensors have a lot of issue trying to get light into the sensor, giving you enough exposure when shooting in low light situations. However, this camera by itself has a very good ISO, and this camera performs really well in low light already. However, there's a couple reasons why I recommend a speed booster. Now this one is a VILTROX M2. This is a EF to M2 speed booster, so it would be a micro four thirds to EF mount. So essentially this end is the same as your micro four thirds cameras, and this end is going to give you a EF, so Canon style mount. So after you put this onto the camera, you can take your Canon zoom lens or prime lens and put it on like so. And with the speed booster, it actually shows up on the camera as an f2.8. I kid you not. This lens now is essentially the same thing as the 24-70 f2.8. So there's two main benefits: more light and more accurate field of view. You're able to get a wider shot, a more cinematic image, really. And on top of that, you're able to use Canon type lenses and other mounts with the micro four thirds. Micro four thirds size sensors, people complain about them because they're small and it's hard to get that shallow depth of field. However, I would argue that it's not necessarily a bad thing because you can do things like this now. This is the VILTROX, but I recommend a Metabones if you're willing to spend the money. This one's about $200. Now the Metabones is around $800 to $900. Now let's get into tip number 5, which has to do with the speed booster, vintage lenses. Now what I have right here, if you haven't seen it already, but I've done a whole video on this. I've done a video on how to modify vintage lenses so that you can use them with your digital cameras. This is one of my favorite lenses of all time. This is my Contact Zeiss 28mm f2.8. Now this lens, if I take off this little adapter here, this is where things get crazy right now. Here we have a, here, let's take this off. Let's take this step by step to show you guys. Here I've got a micro four thirds size sensor, very small sensor, and typically you would use lenses that are much smaller. So this is like an 8mm. You'd have to use a lens with a micro four thirds mount. So this would essentially go on the camera. And it's cute, looks good. This is an 8mm. They're not all this small, but this is a very cute lens. Now, this is a lens made for the sensor. So the 8mm is actually 8mm versus if I were to just put this on without a speed booster, this 28 would be more like a 50. It'd be cropping in 2 times. So let's take this guy off here. Now, if you get a speed booster, you put the speed booster onto the camera. So now your micro four thirds mount turns into an EF mount. And then if you use an old lens like the Contact Zeiss, this is actually CY Yashica mount. And for $20, probably even less now, since I got this such a long time ago, you can get a CY to contacts, you can get a CY to EF mount. So now this lens is basically a Canon lens. So essentially I can take this lens and I can put it onto the speed booster and turn it on. So right now we can be using vintage lenses with the Blackmagic Pocket Cinema Camera 4K. Now if I turn this on, just so I can get, a little bit of a... Now if I turn this on, this is a 28mm. So now I'm gonna record with the camera, with the focus peaking on. I can get a really nice shot, and look how much light I can get in here. So right now I'm at an f8, and if I go to an f2.8, because I have the speed booster, I'm actually beyond that, so I can get crazy shallow depth of field. Let me just turn down the ISO a little bit. Let's try to get this exposed better here. Let's get it on the table here. So now, look how blurry that background is. Let's get a nice low shot here. We're just in the studio here. So this is my shot. Look at that. Look how blurry that background is. So I can rack to, this is what I'm seeing right here. Studio needs some work. But look at that, at an f2.8, this is a very nice lens. They're actually quite expensive, these styles, but I can put in cheaper ones in there. So if I focus on this little part right here, this is just, I believe, the iris on that lens. But look at that. Now, if I take this off, and I put on something like the f4, this lens, I can go to a 2.8, so that's a 2.8. Now at the same ISO, if I bring this aperture all the way down to an f2.8, it's hard to tell exactly, but I know for a fact that this isn't quite as shallow and it's not quite as bright as our other lens. But the 24 is quite wide and the 28 is very wide on that as well. But yeah, like this speed booster really rocks it, man. All in all, I hope you guys use these tips and tricks. You can really improve the performance of this camera and elevate your work. If you guys have any questions, please comment in the description. Also, head over to www.redcapelearning.com. We also have an academy that we've launched. So I've got courses on DSLR filmmaking. I hope you guys enjoy your day. And again, message us if you have any questions about this camera.